Well, South Carolina will look to extend their four-game winning streak this weekend when they take on Missouri, and you can watch that game on the SEC Network at 4 o'clock. And not just a South Carolina alum, but a Gamecock Central alum, Alyssa Lang will be doing sideline reporting. Alyssa, I know you're always excited to be back in Columbia to cover the Gamecocks, but to be able to come back during a time where USC is 5-2, ranked nationally, and just the energy, which will be another sold-out game at Williams-Brice Stadium, I'm sure it has to be extra special.
Oh, man, I'm always, as you said, so excited to come back to Columbia. But, yeah, you just nailed it with all the excitement and all the energy around this program right now. Like you said, sold out. Gamecock fans have been just as rabid as they always are, but showing up in numbers this season for a game that hasn't really gone South Carolina's way the last 3 years that they've played this Missouri team. I'm always excited to be back on the sidelines for a game that obviously means a lot from a pride and respect standpoint, but also when you look at the SEC East and where we could be at the end of the season too.
Well, and it seems like it was just yesterday, the Michael Scarnecchia monsoon game. So there's obviously a lot of history when it comes to this game in terms of just little things like that. And, of course, they play for a trophy, so that's always neat too. But, Alyssa, I think there's some Gamecock fans that probably look at this matchup. And, yes, okay, Missouri's been a thorn in the backside for the Gamecocks, it seems like, in recent years. But at the same time, too, even though they are towards the bottom of the SEC, they've lost 3 games by 7 points or less. Like, this is a team that you certainly just can't take for granted.
Yeah, this is a team that, as much as we talk about confidence for South Carolina, Missouri has a lot of that too. You remember several weeks ago when they had Georgia at home in Como, and that was a game that came down to the final minutes. That's the number 1 team in the country. So Missouri, especially from a defensive standpoint, has kind of that chip on their shoulder as far as knowing that they can take it down to the wire against some really good football teams. South Carolina, on the other hand, looks back at that Georgia game and they use that as a chip on their shoulder, kind of in the opposite direction as far as we believe we're a lot better than what we showcased in that early SEC East matchup against the Bulldogs. So yeah, this is a Missouri team that you certainly cannot count out. Things looked like they were off to a good start for the Tigers a week ago when they took a double-digit lead on Vanderbilt, again at home. But consistency has been an issue for Coach Drinkwitz's squad, and that's something that they've harped on a lot throughout the season. Certainly this week after that Vanderbilt game, they let the Commodores come back, make it a second-half game. They're not executing in all 3 phases of the game to keep Vanderbilt in it, and truly, Vandy had an opportunity to potentially send that game into overtime a week ago and potentially go on and win it. So this is a Missouri team that in flashes has some of the same similarities that we saw from South Carolina early in the season, as far as not necessarily finishing plays, missing tackles, not being consistent from start to finish, something that I think South Carolina has really turned a corner on in the last couple of weeks. But to your point, it's a Missouri team with an equally big chip on their shoulder, and they know what this can do for them going up against a team that just broke into the top 25. They have a lot of pride when it comes to the Mayor's Cup, so this is not a game that can be taken lightly from South Carolina's point of view.
And one thing that has really stood out to me is that, okay, maybe they're not necessarily in the top 10, top 15, or ranked defensively like Kentucky, but there's still a defense that's pretty stingy. And I know a lot of Gamecock fans probably don't want me to say this, but I expect this game to be a low-scoring affair. I'm not sure if you necessarily agree with me on that, but, what do you kind of expect in terms of just the way Missouri's defense presents challenges for USC this weekend?
Yeah, I think as much as we've emphasized when it comes to South Carolina over the last couple of weeks how important a fast start would be, I think this week is just as important as ever, because you nailed it there. When it comes to their defense, I think something that flies under the radar a little bit with that squad out of Columbia, Missouri, is the age that they have on that side of the ball. You really look at every single phase of that defense, from the defensive front to the safeties to the DBs. I mean, there's seniority in every single position group when it comes to that starting defense for the Tigers. You look at somebody like a Jeffcoat, you look at a Chad Bailey, you look at a Martez Manuel. These are guys who have been in that system for quite a while, who understand the assignment, for lack of a better word, And sometimes when it comes down to some of these knockout, drag-out fights in the SEC East, knowledge on the field is going to be that thing that gives you the edge. So Missouri certainly has some tenured veterans on that side of the ball, certainly. I think they will lean on their defense, as their offense has been, again, a bit inconsistent over the past couple of weeks. They've obviously gotten some good play from their quarterback in Brady Cook. The run game isn't quite what I believe South Carolina's is at that point, which is kind of become the identity of the Gamecocks offense. But I do think they lean heavily on the defense, and it will really come down to Missouri's defensive front against South Carolina's run game in Juju McDowell, Marshawn Lloyd, Christian Beal-Smith. If South Carolina can run the football against Missouri early, I think that could be a good indication of how this game goes down the stretch.
Alyssa, as someone that went to USC during the heyday of Gamecock football, what would being bowl eligible before the end of October mean, especially considering the fact that 23 months ago they had fired their head coach and they were sitting here with a record of 2-5?
It's pretty crazy to think about it, right? Like this, if they get a win on Saturday, bowl eligibility is signed, sealed, delivered, and that is something that for several years, as you mentioned, was something that this team was fighting for down the stretch. I mean, it's going to do even more for the energy surrounding this program. You know, you open this conversation talking about the sellout, talking about the energy. I got so many texts from people last week during the Texas A&M game saying that was one of the wildest environments they had seen at Williams-Brice Stadium in years. When you look at what is yet to come on the rest of the schedule, if they can get a win over Missouri, bowl eligibility, again, a team they haven't beaten in 3 years, they finally get over that Kentucky hump, they finally get over that Texas A&M hump, ranked for the first time in years as well, that only is going to continue to blow up some of that excitement and the possibility of the future and what is to come, not only this year, but for years to come, with South Carolina's competitiveness in the SEC. So, yeah, it definitely gives flashes of when I was there during the 2012, 2013, 2014 years. And I certainly hope for Gamecock fans who are used to that and miss those kind of performances that what we've seen this season is here to stay.
You mentioned that atmosphere. I know that you and Chris Dorian, I know we had a chance to talk about it on Sirius XM earlier in the week on SEC Radio. Yeah, that place was absolutely electric, and I expect it to be very big this weekend as well. Alyssa, one last question for you. What would being able to not only get a win this weekend for Shane Beamer, but for this coaching staff in general, right? You look at what they're trying to do from a recruiting standpoint. When you think back to the Spurrier era and what they were able to accomplish, I mean, I know it's tough to compare, and it's very difficult when it's only been, a year and a half in for Shane Beamer. But what would this do? What would this do for this program in terms of being able to send that message that, hey, it's not just, putting on a pair of sunglasses and dancing around, that there is something special going on in Columbia?
Well, I think it goes back to the phrase that winning fixes everything, right? And coaches throw that around with us a lot when we're talking about rebuilding programs, and that goes for everywhere, not just South Carolina, but it's true. Winning fixes everything. If you've got recruits coming to your stadium, standing there watching you handle another team from your conference, or even go down to the wire with another team from your conference, and they're taking in the environment and the pageantry and what it would feel like to be part of turning that program around, that goes a really long way. So when you hear coaches like Shane Beamer saying, hey, we need it loud, we need it full, we need it packed, that's a big reason as to why, not just for the guys who are on the roster currently to give them that push and give them that home field advantage, but because of what that does for the future of your program for years and years to come as you're hosting these recruits. So, yeah, I mean, I think a win, to go back to your original question, a win means a lot for this staff, which has faced a lot of questions since they got to Columbia, especially when it comes to an offensive standpoint with offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield. I think a win proves that, yes, we are moving in the right direction. We have the right people here in Columbia, and we are continuing to go down that path. I think if you're that staff, that's what you can take away knowing that you're going up against another program that is in a similar situation, right? Trying to get back on top, trying to get back through a rebuild, trying to rebuild a culture. So anytime you can take down another program that's in a similar situation as you, I think it's a win, certainly. And for this staff, which to your point is still young, still has a lot to prove, the best way to do that is by winning football games. So to become bowl eligible week 9, to be able to get a win over a program in the SEC East, which I would say the same exact thing for Missouri, not quite bowl eligibility on the line yet, but when it comes to that SEC East rivalry, it means a lot for both of these teams.
Where's the first stop when you have an opportunity to go get food in Columbia, if you do it this weekend?
My real, only consistent stop these days is at Kaminsky's in the Vista. I'm not sure where dinner is going to be on Friday night, but I'm a big Kaminsky's dessert gal. I always get the Toll House pie, whether I eat it in Columbia or I'm eating it in the car driving back home. That is my go-to.
I'm disappointed myself. I've only had the margarita there. No, the the espresso martini. I've only had the espresso martini. Yeah. I will say Hall's makes a really good one, but that kind of goes without saying. But yeah, I guess I got to go over there. Freaking 6 years, and I never